What would you do if, after 30 years of hard work, you finally bought your dream retirement land, only for your neighbor to block your entrance with a giant block of concrete? I used to think retirement would be the most peaceful chapter of my life. After 3 decades working as a real estate engineer, my wife Linda, a recently retired corporate attorney, and I decided to leave the city and buy a small plot of land in Colorado to spend our final years in peace. 5 acres. Majestic mountain views, clean, crisp air, and most importantly, no HOA, no absurd regulations, no ridiculous fines. No one is telling me what color I can paint my front door. The land sat just outside Oak Creek Estates, a luxury community known for being full of control freaks. I knew that, and I knew I'd picked a parcel of land outside the HOA boundary. I checked 3 times before I signed anything. Linda and I agreed to do one small thing before fully settling in: replace the old rusted gate with a clean wooden one, flanked by 2 sturdy stone pillars. Simple, tasteful, a nod to classic Western ranch style. We hired a crew, got the proper building permits. Nothing flashy, nothing extra, just a symbol of the new life we had long dreamed of. Everything was going smoothly until one morning in March. I brought my coffee outside to check on the progress, but instead of seeing a gate under construction, I saw a giant block of concrete dropped smack in the middle of our driveway. It weighed at least a ton, sitting there like a smug declaration of war. On top of it was a sheet of paper printed in bold black ink with a massive Oak Creek Estates HOA logo. The bold text in the center read, "Construction in violation of aesthetic standards. Immediate cease required." I stood frozen for a moment. The coffee cooled in my hand. We were not part of the HOA. I had reviewed every boundary line, every plat map. There was no legal way this HOA had authority over our land. And yet, the block of concrete sat there, with a warning stamped in arrogance, as if I were the one disturbing their picture-perfect neighborhood. I called Linda, less than 5 minutes. Later, she was standing beside me, eyes like ice, holding the original land deed folder she'd kept in the car since day one. We were reviewing the notice when a silver SUV pulled up at the curb. Out stepped a woman in her 60s. Blonde curls, trimmed and styled, dressed head to toe in expensive designer labels, walking like the whole neighborhood belonged to her. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter, I'm Brenda Whitmore, president of the Oak Creek HOA," she said, not even pretending to be polite. "We left a notice about your little farm-style project. Quite unsightly, if I may be honest." The way she spat the word farm made me want to spit my coffee right back at her, like it was some kind of slur. I kept my composure. "Mrs. Whitmore, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. Our land isn't part of the HOA. We verified that thoroughly before purchasing." She smiled, but her eyes were sharp as blades. "That's correct. However, the access road leading to your home is. Oak Creek Lane falls under HOA jurisdiction, and your gate is an eyesore for the community. We simply can't allow that." She handed me an envelope, a cease and desist order stamped by the HOA board, threatening further action if we didn't comply. And like the perfect suburban queen she fancied herself, Brenda turned, stepped back into her SUV, and drove away, leaving Linda and me standing beside a 1-ton concrete insult and a rapidly boiling sense of fury. I've handled hundreds of land disputes in my life, but I've never had someone pull a stunt like this, blocking someone's gate with concrete while preaching about community standards. Linda said quietly, "They have no idea who they're messing with." I clenched my fists. I didn't know what Brenda thought I was, but a retired real estate engineer with too much free time and a healthy bank account was not someone she should have provoked. The next morning, I was up before sunrise. Our dining table was covered in survey maps, deed records, zoning codes. Linda brewed the coffee. We both know the game had begun. I've handled hundreds of real estate deals in my 30-year career, but that morning, sitting amidst piles of land documents and boundary maps, I knew this wasn't just business, this was war. The road in question, Oak Creek Lane, the narrow stretch connecting the main road to our ranch gate, cuts across the edge of the Oak Creek Estates subdivision. On paper, it was listed as a community asset managed by the HOA. But as Linda and I combed through every deed, every transfer record, every stamped document, something strange began to emerge. "Hold on," Linda said, tapping her finger on the file. "Something's not right here." She was right. During the subdivision process 2 decades ago, that road was supposed to be transferred to the HOA, but the paperwork showed the transfer was never completed. Ownership remained with a company named Clearview Development, the original developer of Oak Creek. After the 2008 financial crash, Clearview went bankrupt. So, who owns it now? I asked. Linda opened her laptop and accessed the county's public record system. And there it was, like a gift from the heavens. Oak Creek Lane was still legally owned by East Range Holdings, a dormant real estate investment. "Firm. No one's touched it since 2012, Linda murmured, eyes glued to the screen. "They probably don't even know they still own it." I looked at her, a flicker of hope, and something sly, ignited in both our eyes. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" I asked. She smiled. "If they don't care, and we do, why not try to buy it?" That very afternoon I called Maya, a real estate attorney I'd known since my working days. Maya wasn't just smart. She was razor sharp and had gone toe-to-toe with more than her fair share of HOAs who loved sticking their noses where they didn't belong. She showed up the next morning. We sat on the back porch, facing the distant mountains, warm mugs of coffee in hand. She listened intently to the entire story, jotting down notes with surgical precision. Then she went quiet, as if she were calculating every possibility on an invisible chessboard. "The HOA has temporary management rights," Maya said. "But they don't own the road, and it's ownership that gives the legal right to control who uses it, not management." I straightened in my chair. "You think I could buy it?" "I don't think," Maya replied. "I'm certain." For the next few hours, the three of us dove deep into public land databases, tracing every breadcrumb that led to East Range Holdings. The company still existed, inactive, sure, but still on the books. The kind of investment firm that holds dead dirt to minimize taxes and wait for opportunity. I fired off emails, made a few calls, leaned on every industry connection I had. Eventually, thanks to an old friend now working at an investment fund in Denver, I got a call back. "That strip of road? Yeah, it's on our liquidation list. You're interested?" I feigned casual interest. "Just want to make sure my driveway access stays secure. Tiny little parcel, I'm offering a fair price." They agreed to discuss. When I hung up the phone, my heart thumped in my chest like I'd just landed my first $1 million deal. I sat there for a moment, then turned to Linda. "If this deal goes through, that HOA will have dug their own grave." That evening, as the crimson sunset spilled across the valley, I looked out at the block of concrete still sitting defiantly across my driveway and thought, "All right, Brenda, you blocked my path once, but I'm about to block yours. Permanently." I've walked into plenty of high-stakes meetings in my life, from executive boardrooms to million-dollar deal negotiations, but I'd never been this excited heading into an HOA meeting. The day the paperwork was finalized, Maya arrived. At my house with a thick stack of legal documents and a grin that barely disguised her satisfaction. "Congratulations," she said. "As of today, you are the legal owner of Oak Creek Lane, the only road leading into the HOA that once looked down on you." I stared at the file, my name boldly printed on the deed. Carter Holdings, LLC. My heart thumped. I'd run a real estate firm for years, but no deal had ever felt this sweet. Maya offered Want me to send them a legal notice? But I shook my head. No, I'll deliver it myself. The next day was the HOA's regular board meeting. I put on a dark tailored suit, not for show, but to send a very clear message. I wasn't coming to ask for permission. I was going to make a declaration. Linda came with me. Maya brought the legal documents. We arrived just as the meeting began. Inside, the Oak Creek Estates clubhouse, where everything from the chandeliers to the floral centerpieces screamed faux luxury. Brenda Whitmore, as usual, sat at the head of the table, hair lacquered, eyeliner sharp, pristine white blazer, running the community like it was the White House. She was mid-monologue about enhancing the community flower beds and reaffirming our high aesthetic standards. When I raised my hand, the room paused. Brenda's eyes caught mine, and her face instantly changed color. Mr. Carter, this meeting is for Oak Creek residents only. You're not part of this community. I'll have to ask you to leave. I smiled and stepped to the center of the room. Actually, I have something to share that concerns everyone here, and I believe you'll want to hear it. Brenda frowned. We are not obligated to listen, Maya interrupted, stepping forward. As legal counsel for Mr. Carter, I'm here to present documentation related to the ownership of Oak Creek Lane, the sole access road to this community. The air thickened like someone had just snuffed out a candle. Maya began handing out copies of the ownership certificate to every board member. As of yesterday, she said clearly, this road was legally transferred from East Range Holdings to Carter Holdings, LLC. That means Mr. Carter is now the sole legal owner of the road you all use every day. Brenda's jaw dropped. No, that can't be. That road is community property. No, ma'am, Maya replied, cold and exact. The records show this HOA never completed the transfer of ownership from the original developer. East Range retained the asset for 15 years, and Mr. Carter has now purchased it, legally and fully. The room exploded. Murmurs, gasps, people turned to each other with stunned, angry, bewildered expressions. Not aimed at me, but at Brenda, the woman they believed controlled everything. Robert Malone, the HOA vice president, turned red and slammed the table. We'll sue! This is fraud! Feel free, Maya said, not blinking. But I suggest you review the contract and the new road use agreement. I laid down the final set of documents, the road use agreement. It included two simple clauses. The HOA must immediately remove all barriers obstructing my access. Beginning next month, the HOA would owe a monthly infrastructure maintenance fee set at 3 times their current HOA dues. Yes, triple. Not because I needed the money, but because some debts are better paid in humiliation than dollars. Brenda forced a smile. You're extorting an entire community. I met her eyes. No, I'm applying the rules, just like you did with me. No one is above the bylaws, right? Linda gave my hand a light squeeze. Maya gathered the papers. The room sat frozen in a fog of disbelief and shame. I turned and walked out, leaving behind the sound of unraveling authority. That evening, I sat on my porch with a glass of bourbon in hand, gazing at the entrance, still blocked by that ridiculous concrete slab. I smiled, because I knew that was now just a monument to a game they thought they were winning, until I flipped the board. I thought after the board meeting, Brenda and her little fake power council would retreat quietly. Anyone with half a brain would have realized it was time to wave the white flag. But no. What I was dealing with wasn't reason. It was the pack. Mentality of people who can't stand losing control, and they chose the tactic they knew best, retaliation through underhanded tricks. Just 3 days after the meeting, a new concrete block showed up in front of my gate, twice the size of the Tyke first one. No one claimed responsibility. No contractor left a trace, but I knew exactly who was behind it. The woman in the spotless white blazer, always preaching about respecting the rules. was the same one breaking them faster than anyone the moment her power was threatened. Linda looked at the new concrete monstrosity. Not angry, just ice cold. Good. The dirtier they play, the easier they are to sue. Maya immediately drafted a formal letter demanding the removal of the unauthorized obstruction from private property, with the deed to Oak Creek Lane attached. As for me, I did what I do best. I went public. The next morning, I hired a crew to remove the concrete slab in broad daylight. I sat in my wooden chair sipping coffee as the excavator clawed up chunks of that heavy cement like peeling off old skin. Barely 10 minutes in, Brenda stormed in like a brush fire. She brought Robert and 2 of the HOA's maintenance guys with her. "Stop immediately!" Brenda shrieked, planting herself in front of the machine. "You have no right touching HOA property." I walked forward without a word and handed her a notarized copy of the road deed, the red seal still fresh. "This is no longer HOA property, Brenda," I said calmly. "It's my land, and I'm just cleaning up trash off of it." She trembled, snatching the paper from my hand like she meant to tear it in two. "You'll regret this stunt. Our lawyers will be my guest," I interrupted. "But do hurry. Starting next week, your road usage fees will begin accruing late penalties." She had nothing left to say, just stood there, lips tight, face pale. As the excavator lifted that block of concrete and dropped it into the truck like it was just more junk, I felt like I'd cleared the path, not just for me, but for everyone she'd ever bullied. That afternoon, Maya submitted an official notice. To the HOA, payment due for monthly road access fees set at triple the standard HOA dues. I didn't need the money. What I needed was for them to feel what it's like to be forced to play by someone else's rules, the exact way they'd done to me. That evening, Linda found something interesting. On Oak Creek's neighborhood forum, Brenda had emailed the entire community, calling me an extortionist, an outsider destroying the spirit of the neighborhood. Linda laughed. HOA press conference. I didn't reply publicly. I didn't need to. Actions would speak for me. The next day, I installed new signs at both ends of Oak Creek Lane, private road. Permit required unauthorized access will be recorded and prosecuted. Below, in fine print, contact Morgan Properties LLC to request access. Maya said, "This is still pretty gentle. If you want, I can draft a notice for installing an automatic gate." I nodded. "No rush. Let the pressure build first." That night, the new camera I'd installed earned its keep. Robert Malone, the pudgy vice president with a god complex, was caught on video kicking over one of the warning signs, then struggling to pull out the second one but failing miserably. I watched the footage at least 5 times. Each time felt more satisfying than the last. The next morning, I filed a police report with video evidence of property damage. By afternoon, Robert was served with a summons and fined for vandalism. I didn't want him in jail. I just wanted him to get called out in front of his wife and kids and finally feel the sting of being dragged into the light. At this point, it wasn't just about a gate anymore. It had become a line in the sand between freedom and control, between neighbors who wanted peace and a board of self-appointed monarchs, and I was taking them down, one exposed tyrant at a time. If there's one thing I've learned after 3 decades in real estate, it's this. Real power doesn't come from the seat you occupy, but from knowing when to strike and when to sit still. I had already struck. Now it was time to wait for the rotten chain of the HOA to snap, one link at a time. And that happened. Faster than I expected. A week after Robert Malone got fined for kicking over my sign, I received a message from an unknown number. Just 3 words. Need to talk. The sender? Robert himself. We agreed to meet at a cafe 20 miles outside of Oak Creek, far enough that no one would see us sitting at the same table. When Robert walked in, I barely recognized him. Gone was the branded polo shirt stretched across his gut. Gone was the gleaming Rolex. He wore a plain button-down shirt, hair disheveled, face carrying the defeated look of a man who knew his time was up. He didn't beat around the bush. "I want out. Brenda's gone too far. I can't follow her anymore." I said nothing. Just watched him, waiting to see how deep this act would go. "She's been embezzling HOA funds for years," Robert admitted, eyes glued to the table. "It started with small, plants, security equipment. Then it got bigger, remodeling her kitchen, buying a car. I tried to push back, but..." "But what?" I asked, voice steady. He swallowed. "She used HOA funds to buy me a boat, labeled it as a lake safety asset. That's when I got roped in." Still, I said nothing, letting him sit there and listen to the sound of his own corruption. Finally, Robert slid a USB stick across the table. "This has fake invoices, emails between me and Brenda, altered meeting minutes." "What do you want in return?" I asked. "You don't sue me. You don't name me in the road ownership fallout. I'll resign from the board, and I'll testify if needed." I looked at him, a rat trying to leap off a sinking ship, still clutching its stolen cheese. "I'll discuss it with my lawyer," I said. That night, Linda, Maya, and I sat down. Maya reviewed the contents of the USB, then said simply, "This evidence is enough to bring down the entire HOA board." Linda nodded. "We'll agree, but on conditions." We drafted 3 terms. Robert must resign publicly and sign a statement admitting financial misconduct. He must repay the funds used for the boat. He must issue a formal apology to the community, acknowledging Carter Holdings as the legal owner of Oak Creek Lane. The next morning, Robert signed everything, faster than expected. He knew that with a single click from me, his whole life could vanish into a legal black hole. We submitted the evidence to the HOA's Internal Oversight Committee. But instead of waiting for action, I leaked a copy of the financial report to the neighborhood social group. Within hours, Oak Creek exploded $30,000 in landscaping fees, while the grass was dead and patchy. $12,000 for lake safety equipment, identical to the cost of Robert's boat. Thousands more labeled for meeting room upgrades, which turned out to be Brenda's kitchen remodel. That evening, I got a call from David Blake, a longtime resident, retired Marine, and natural-born enemy of tyrannical HOAs. "You just set off a bomb," he said. "The whole neighborhood's buzzing. Someone's already drafting a petition to call an emergency meeting to dissolve the board." I just smiled. "I didn't do anything, I just pulled the last pin." The next morning, Robert sent in his resignation email. No sugarcoating. "I acknowledge my misconduct. I accept the consequences and ask for the community's forgiveness." Brenda said nothing. But I knew she was screaming in the dark, because what I had in my hands was only just beginning to unfold. There was one thing Brenda Whitmore never saw coming. When you build a kingdom on fear and control, it only takes a single crack for the whole thing to collapse like a sand castle meeting the tide. And that crack was me. Just 3 days after Robert's resignation and public confession, the entire Oak Creek community woke up like from a trance. People who had kept quiet out of fear of being fined, targeted, or labeled non-compliant finally began to speak out, petitions calling for the removal of the entire HOA board spread like wildfire. The residents' Facebook group, once policed so tightly that even formatting errors got warnings, was now flooded with posts openly criticizing Brenda and her cronies. The stories poured in like a broken dam. An elderly man was fined $200 for hanging the American flag slightly crooked. A single mother threatened legal action for planting a backyard vegetable garden. A family with an autistic child forced to remove a sensory play area for being aesthetic violations. And the one thing they all had in common? They had been bullied, shamed, or silenced by Brenda or Robert. That weekend, a special emergency community meeting was held, not called by the HOA, but by the residents themselves. The clubhouse wasn't big enough, so the meeting moved to the local high school gymnasium, which probably hadn't seen that many people since the 2009 PTA fundraiser. Linda and I arrived early and took seats in the back. I had no intention of speaking. I was just there to watch a corrupt regime collapse under its own weight. Brenda arrived last, same white outfit, same perfectly applied makeup. But her eyes no longer sparkled with authority. She scanned the room like entering enemy territory, no longer in command of a compliant crowd. Robert didn't show up. I knew he couldn't bear to face the people who once trusted him. Brenda opened with her usual executive voice, claiming it was all a misunderstanding, that outside influences were undermining community unity. Then she mentioned it to me. The man who purchased the road into this community, she hissed like naming a demon. He's demanding unreasonable fees just so we can use our own road. I almost laughed, but I held it in. I knew the best part was still coming. Right then, an elderly man stood up, stooped back but a firm voice. I've lived here for 17 years. I've paid over $24,000 in road maintenance fees, and now I learn we never even owned the road. A wave of gasps, mutters, and angry nods rippled through the room. Then another woman stood up, a nurse I often saw walking her child near my house. I got fined $300 for leaving my trash bins out one day while I was in the hospital with my child during an asthma attack. And Brenda used our money to remodel her kitchen? The room erupted in outrage. Brenda tried to regain control. You're all being manipulated by an outsider, a man who doesn't live by our community standards. At that moment, Marcus Tilden, the city clerk, stepped up to the microphone. Marcus was tidy, soft-spoken, but when he spoke, law followed. I was invited here to confirm records. According to county land files, Oak Creek Lane has never belonged to the HOA, was never officially transferred, and is now legally owned by Mr. Carter. Brenda froze, then snapped back. That's a technicality. We'll sue. You may do so, Marcus replied calmly. But I'm afraid you'd be suing against fact. With nothing left to cling to, Brenda gripped the podium, voice trembling. I've dedicated 8 years to this community. I kept it clean, kept home, values stable. And this is how you repay me? I looked around. No one answered. People had heard enough. The vote followed immediately. Percent voted to remove the current HOA board. An interim board was elected on the spot, made up of residents like David Blake, Nurse Lila, and even a retired law professor, all of whom had been victims of the previous regime. And finally, something I never expected. The entire room agreed to sign the new road use agreement, officially recognizing Carter Holdings as the road owner and accepting the fair maintenance fees I proposed. Stepped up to the mic just once that evening. I didn't come here for revenge, I said. I just wanted to be respected as a neighbor, and I believe we can rebuild that, starting with transparency and fairness. There was no wild applause, but many heads nodded. And in that quiet, I saw something clearly. This community was healing. Brenda didn't leave through the front doors. She slipped out the side like a ghost banished from the very kingdom she once ruled. I didn't look back. No one in the hall did. You don't see off a tyrant. You just hope they leave quickly. And quietly. 2 days after the meeting, the County District Attorney's Office officially launched a criminal investigation into the former Oak Creek HOA board, based on evidence from Robert's USB and documents compiled by Elaine, my wife. This wasn't about internal disagreements anymore. It was white-collar crime. The charges? Financial fraud, misappropriation of community funds, abuse of power, and if they were lucky, they might avoid charges for obstruction of justice. Just 1 week later, the local newspaper ran it front and center. Former HOA president under criminal investigation for alleged misuse of tens of thousands in community funds. Brenda's face, once gracing puff pieces about charming women leading thriving neighborhoods, was now printed in grayscale beneath the headline, Under Criminal Investigation. And Robert? He signed a cooperation agreement officially, becoming a state witness. I suspect he thought he'd dodged the bullet, but in truth, he had merely changed roles, from co-conspirator to sacrificial pawn. As for me, I did nothing. No need. The weight of truth was pressing down on those who had once pressed it upon me. Linda and I spent our time tending the back garden. The wooden gate, the one they had once banned, was finally built, just as we'd originally planned. Rustic, simple, and beautiful in its honesty. No fake Roman columns, no gaudy stucco trim. Just something that was mine, on land that is mine. On the day the gate was finished, we threw a small party. David brought his signature ribs. Lila brought salad. Kids ran through the yard laughing under a sign that read, "Welcome to Carter Farm." I looked around at it all and thought, this is what a community looks like. You don't need a tyrannical HOA to have civility, just mutual respect. But the story didn't end there. 3 days later, Patricia Whitmore was officially indicted. 6 counts of fraud, 2 counts of misappropriating community funds, 1 criminal count for using HOA property to renovate her own home. Robert was named in the filings too, though he got leniency. Both were ordered to repay the stolen funds and now face probation, or worse. And me? I received a note from the interim HOA board. "Mr. Carter, we would like to invite you to serve as our policy advisor." I laughed out loud. Funny how the world turns. The man once locked out is now invited to rewrite the rules. I accepted, not for the title, but to ensure one thing, that no one ever abuses power again, that no one is ever blocked at their own gate because their aesthetic didn't match someone else's clipboard. That night, I received one final piece of news. Brenda had listed her house for sale. No press release, no explanations, just a quiet line of text mirroring how she once ignored the voices of her neighbors. Robert had already left in the middle of the night. The shop owner told me, "Wherever they go now, they walk with their heads down. Can't look people in the eye." I simply nodded. Not with joy, not with hatred, just with justice. They say justice comes slowly, but when it does, it rings out like a bell of steel piercing the quiet night, shrill, undeniable, and humbling to those who once thought themselves untouchable. A few weeks after Brenda was indicted and listed her house for sale, Oak Creek Estates had become an entirely different place. The interim board, led by David Blake, began rewriting the entire HOA rulebook. Gone were absurd clauses like flower pots must match porch tile color or yard. Trees may not exceed 2 meters. In their place, financial transparency, resident grievance rights, clear term limits, and most importantly, any changes to shared property must receive at least 75% resident approval. I wasn't there to dictate anything. I only gave advice when asked. And when they brought up the idea of transferring ownership of Oak Creek Lane back to the community, I agreed, but with one condition. I asked Maya to draft the contract. I would transfer ownership of the road to a nonprofit community land trust, representing all Oak Creek residents, with a permanent clause guaranteeing unrestricted access to my property, and any future changes in road usage must have at least 75% resident approval. No HOA president, no mayor, no single authority could make that decision alone, they agreed. And just like that, I was no longer the road's owner, but rather a part of the very community I helped rebuild. On the day we signed the transfer, David shook my hand tightly. "You have no idea," he said, "how badly we needed you. If you hadn't come, hadn't fought," I smiled. "I was just protecting my front gate." "No," David said, shaking his head. "You helped us open a new one." Brenda vanished from the map like she had never existed. Her house sold for 20% below market value. A young family moved in, No one mentioned the past. No one needed to. Justice doesn't require resentment. It only needs the silence of those who failed. Robert moved to a small town about 60 miles away. I heard he now works part-time at a bait-and-tackle shop. Life, perhaps, has quieted down for him. But reputation? That's long gone. As for me, I finally finished the dream gate to our ranch, a simple wooden arch, 2 solid stone posts, no fences, no warning signs. Right beneath it, we placed a small stone slab, repurposed from the concrete. Block HOA once dumped to block our entrance. Linda turned it into a small fountain, water trickling over it all day long. I mounted a brass plaque that read, "To the Oak Creek community." A reminder, respect doesn't come from power. It comes from how we treat one another. No one asked what it meant, but everyone who lived through Brenda's reign understood. We now live the life we originally dreamed of. A garden out back, a few chickens, grandkids running through the yard. On weekends, Linda tends the tomatoes. I read on the porch. No one calls the cops over laughing children. No one mails warnings because the grass grew too long. This is living, not by rules but by freedom. Some people ask me, why didn't you? Just give up at the start? I just smile, because some fights aren't optional, not for a gate, but because if I didn't stand up, someone else might be next. Controllers always hope you'll let it go, that you'll find it too exhausting, too complicated, and walk away. But sometimes, doing what's right isn't easy. Sometimes, to live in peace, you have to be willing to raise hell. This story began with a block of concrete, and it ended with a wooden gate, opening onto a brand new community. I didn't just reclaim my driveway, I reclaimed the right to live rightly, and that was worth every minute of the fight. I didn't fight to win. I fought so no one else would ever be treated the way I was. That gate isn't just an entrance to a home. It's a symbol of the right to live free from the tyranny of those who hide behind the label community protection. HOAs can make rules. But when rules are abused, someone has to stand up. I stood up, and I hope, when it's your turn, you won't back down either.